Tonight, it would terrify any parent, a shooting in a preschool parking lot.
David, I was in that exact location and also in the courthouse where a killer said an angel and a demon told him what to do. And all new 2020 begins right now.
An unlikely killer, an unlikely victim.
Guy's bleeding to death out here.
Twists and turns.
Yeah, he had a hat on and it almost like a beard.
Bombshells galore. It was just stranger than fiction.
The shooter came across the parking lot and raised his arm. Pow, 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 pow.
Initially, people have no idea what's happening, right? They think it's just some lone gunman.
This person was targeted for some reason.
A young father of two senselessly murdered, dropping his child off.
Everyone was scratching their heads. Why was Rusty Snyderman murdered?
After the shooting, the suspect took off in that minivan and sped off.
What did you notice right away about him?
His black beard didn't belong. I mean, it was just, I knew it was a fake beard. It just didn't make sense to me. It just seemed too elaborate and too Hollywood.
There were some previous incidences that were very odd.
He's running. I think he has a gun in his back pocket, and now he's running away. I don't know who the hell he is, and I don't want him by my house.
And then all of a sudden, the entire investigation shifted.
That had to be pretty disturbing.
Looked over Rusty and said, I'm going to get the justice for you. Hopefully get your revenge.
On a clear day with the bird's eye view, you can see all the way to Atlanta. Its big city problems in the distance. Here in Dunwoody, Georgia, crime and danger seem to be somebody else's problem. Until one November morning, this suburban bubble is about to burst with a bang.
It was a beautiful fall day right before Thanksgiving. People were running their morning errands. Parents were dropping their kids off to preschool.
One of those parents is Rusty Snyderman, who's on his way back to his car after dropping off his 2-year-old son.
Witnesses told police they saw a silver minivan pull up. A man hop out, walked up to Rusty, didn't say a word to him.
Walked up, he turned around. Pow, 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 pow.
I heard a couple loud pops and looked up and looked over and saw right in front of me shooting Rusty.
Shot him several times.
I mean, it was pretty much point blank range.
The barrel was either at or right at his skin when fired. There was actually soot deep into the wound from the projectile.
And then calmly and coolly walked back to his vehicle and took off.
It was almost surreal, the experience. There was no chaos or running or yelling or anything. He just went back to his van. It didn't look like what I would think a murder would be.
They thought it was a movie. They were actually looking around for the cameras.
Everybody thinks they know what they would do. You don't.
Somebody's been shot and killed.
Which way did it go?
He headed east, Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon Road?
Yeah, he had a hat on and it almost like a beard.
Was he black, white, Hispanic?
I can't tell. He might have been.
It came over radio that there was a shooting. There was one person down, unknown status, and we all just went.
Somebody records a video. A doctor who happens to be nearby performs CPR, and a teacher grabs the children to get them out of harm's way.
There were a lot of witnesses to the shooting. Everybody saw it happen. The shooter made no effort to conceal themselves.
Honestly, when the call came out, I was shocked. In Dunwoody, everybody's pretty nice and everybody helps each other. So for something like this to happen, it was just a shocker.
The community was absolutely scared. Again, it's not something that happens normally. There's not a lot of violent crime in that area at all.
Guy's bleeding to death out here.
The police and the ambulance are on their way.
He didn't look conscious to me. He looked like he was struggling and trying to, there was some movement, but I knew that it wasn't good.
There was a lot of blood everywhere. There were obvious gunshots to the patient. There was no pulse, and he was unresponsive. But that does not mean that you don't work this patient, because there have been times where we've been able to save patients.
He was white, possibly Hispanic. I would say he's about 5'9", 5'10". He's got a baseball cap on. It's a silver Caravan, almost looks like a Dodge. He had a hat on. It looked like he had a beard and a silver caliber gun.
Let me know when the officer gets right there with the patient.
Is that new? Everybody's doing that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So we did notify surrounding agencies.
I started hearing rumblings about a shooting not far from where I live, probably about a 10-minute drive from my house. And that in and of itself was shocking because it's a very safe community.
Let's go now to Channel 2's Mike Pachinik with the latest on what he's learned. Mike.
At the time of Rusty Snyderman's murder, I was a reporter at WSB TV in Atlanta.
I'm Mike Pachinik, Channel 2 Action News.
His murder happened that morning. I came in the afternoon and was assigned to go back to try to find people who knew Rusty, knew his family, try to get to the bottom of who he was and why somebody would want him murdered.
How did you first learn about the Snyderman shooting? It was in the news, obviously.
Yeah, it was all over the news. A husband is shot and killed right after he drops his child off.
This shooting has shaken the school and the community to its core.
The last thing you think about is dropping off your child at school and something like this happened.
It's very, 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 very scary to happen.
Tragic. Every parent is scared. Every parent who's got a young child in daycare is scared. They didn't know what the motive was. So it was big news in Atlanta.
To me, honestly, it looked like it was professional. It was just the calmness of it. Didn't seem like it was a crime of passion. It was just very cold and calculated.
The shooting did happen at close range. There was no indication that Rusty was going to do anything or was trying to attack the person. It was a purely one-sided shooting, and close range to me said it was personal.
Right now, they are out actively searching for the man that shot this father. Rusty Snyderman's car was parked right there where you see that orange spray paint.
Well, it looks like a hit. Happened in broad daylight with witnesses around.
I absolutely didn't believe at any point that it was a random shooting.
It was somebody that looked like targeted him on purpose.
In the time it takes to count to 4, the innocence of a schoolyard, backpacks, snacks, goodbyes, shrouded in gun smoke, and now mystery.
The school and several of the businesses in this complex do have security cameras. Dunwoody police tell me right now they are actively looking at that video to see if they can get a better description of the suspect.
Initially, people have no idea what's happening, right? They think it's just some lone gunman?
No one could come up with a motive. Random shooting at a daycare center right after a child has been dropped off. This person was targeted for some reason, but nobody knew what that reason was.
Still ahead, the clue you couldn't miss. What did you notice right away about him?
Well, I noticed his black beard.
The gunman's less than brilliant disguise.
Didn't belong. I mean, it was just, I knew it was a fake beard.
Here we are now at Dunwoody Prep. You were here, what was 14 years ago, I guess it was. Former Detective Andrew Thompson takes me back to the scene of the crime, just outside Atlanta. You think the shooter was parked over here?
Yeah, witnesses had the shooter park over here. As Rusty came around this way, he came around the front of his car, and he turned to open the door. The shooter came across the parking lot and raised his arm, pow, 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 pow.
Rusty Snyderman had dropped off his child, and as he was exiting, he was shot multiple times by an unknown assailant who jumped in his vehicle and fled the scene.
This was a huge case in Atlanta, and especially since it happened in the parking lot of a preschool, a young father of 2 senselessly murdered, dropping his child off.
Just shocked that happened here.
This shooting has shaken the school and the community to its core.
I was just in disbelief. You never expect murder to step into your life, and particularly somebody like Rusty. I not only didn't know of any enemies that Rusty had, I couldn't imagine him having an enemy because he was such a positive person.
It was my first homicide. I didn't really know what to expect when I came, but I just clicked right into professional mode and remembered all the steps that I need to take that I learned back in the academy.
You started organizing, you start putting things in motion for witnesses and evidence, but you do something unusual. You bend down to the victim.
Yeah, after I got everybody where I thought they should be and got the base information, I came back over and I looked over Rusty and I said, I'm going to get the justice for you. I'm going to get this guy and hopefully get your revenge. I wanted to assure him that I was going to do the best that I could to bring the killer to justice. And I said, have faith. And I went and started doing my job.
I was tasked with going back and trying to just dig into the family a little bit, find out who they were and where they worked, what sorts of things were important in their lives.
He had a very outgoing personality. He was very engaging. He was very funny. He was fun to be with.
Rusty always had a lot of friends. That goes to Rusty's personality. Rusty would leave an indelible mark on people. He had a personality that always would bring you in.
And tell me about the family and what you learned later on about them.
Rusty and Andrea started dating in college.
The two met at Indiana University at a retreat for Jewish students.
By all accounts, they had a tale romance, and when they finished school, Rusty got an opportunity to get his MBA at Harvard.
They had lived together for 7 years.
They'd been together a long time before they got married, and she was just part of the family then.
They were a good team.
She presents very warm, gives you a huge embrace. So, yeah, I had a good feeling about them.
They had a good marriage. They had 2 young kids. They had a beautiful home. They had a wonderful life. They had a lake house where they spent their weekends.
I've never seen him happier than being a dad. He was a big kid at heart himself, and he just adored his kids.
He was so natural. He just naturally had the skill to connect with them, and he would sit on the floor and play with them. And not everyone has that natural ability, but he really did.
Rusty is getting a lot more time with the kids because Andrea has taken a demanding new job. There's lots of travel. Florida, Colorado, even to Europe.
She was feeling good about it. I think she liked it. I think she was challenged. It was a good change for their family, so I was happy for them.
Police begin to look, of course, at the family as they begin to investigate this case. What did they discover about the couple? Are they happy? Are there struggles?
There was no indication of any strife in the home life. They were your typical successful, upper middle class, hardworking couple.
Now investigators turn back to that security camera video of the bearded killer in the minivan.
The key point of evidence we had was the daycare has a camera there that overlooks the central parking lot. And that was the only visual that we had of the suspect's vehicle driving around once, then coming back around again.
It's a silver Caravan, almost looks like a Dodge. He had a hat on, it looked like he had a beard, and a silver caliber gun.
Witnesses told police that they saw a silver minivan pull up to the scene, and after the shooting, the suspect took off in that minivan and sped off.
2 odd things about that van. 1, witnesses say the license plate was missing. And 2, when detectives rewind, they see that same minivan cruising the parking lot an hour before the shooting. So that morning, you pull in right here?
Yeah.
Larry Minogue was dropping off his son that morning. It was about an hour before the shooting.
As I was pulling into the parking lot, I noticed a van going in front of the building.
What did you notice right away about him?
Well, I noticed his black beard, and I could tell, as far as how dark it was, that it didn't belong. I mean, it was just, I knew it was a fake beard.
Larry says he even scolded the man.
I just looked at him and said, you don't belong here. You shouldn't be driving through this part of the parking lot at this hour.
Did he acknowledge you?
No.
Only later that morning does Larry realize that he'd come that close to a killer.
I hear it on the radio. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, I think I saw that person.
That had to be pretty disturbing.
Well, it was, and then I just called the Dunwoody Police Department and they said, can you come by?
Police release a sketch based on Larry's description. It's shown everywhere.
The thing that really struck me was they all noted that this was a really strange-looking beard on the suspect and that it looked fake.
Some people described it like an Abraham Lincoln beard.
Yeah, he had a hat on and it almost like a beard.
A manhunt now underway for the bearded killer. And why was Rusty Snyderman calling 911 just a week before his murder? Was there an earlier attempt on his life?
He's running. I think he has a gun in his back pocket, and now he's running away. I don't know who the hell he is, and I don't want him by my house.
everyone was scratching their heads. Why was Rusty Snyderman murdered?
They were really focused on chasing down any lead they got because at the time they had no credible information as to who had done this.
We got a lot of leads. Everybody was fielding calls for leads, and because you put something out like that, especially where the public is very interested, and you're going to get a lot of calls.
In fact, a detective from across the country calls to compare notes about his case involving the murder of a Jewish woman just 2 days before Rusty's killing.
One of the most prominent publicists to the stars, Ronnie Chasen, was murdered, shot behind the wheel of her Mercedes in Beverly Hills.
Investigators are working on the theory that this was a planned attack.
The detective from Beverly Hills, California, gave me a call, and he was working a case that also involved people from the Jewish community, and he thought it was worthwhile for him to give me a call to see if there might have been a connection.
I know I got a call from the sheriff of a local county, Putnam County, that had a couple that was killed at their lake house. And so he called to see if there was some kind of connection. Of course, there was no connection. So it does bring out a lot of those kind of maybe similar cases that people are, searching for a lead on their case.
Then there's the tip from a woman so convinced she spotted the man in the sketch that she follows him.
When police put out the picture of the minivan and the composite sketch of the shooter, a woman at a nearby grocery store thought she saw the killer and started taking pictures to try to help police catch this person.
According to police, the woman tails the man into the store and back out into the parking lot, secretly snapping photos with her phone.
And as it turned out, it was not the killer. He had an airtight alibi.
With any investigation, they always want to start by finding out whatever they can about the victim. And so in this case, they dug into where Rusty had worked, what sort of business ventures he was involved in.
We spoke to his business partners.
Some detectives thought the murder looked like the work of a hitman, a murder for hire, possibly related to one of Rusty's past jobs.
We also looked to his wealth management job that he had briefly. That was could be a great indicator as to a motive for it. If you're a multimillionaire and you end up losing millions of dollars, that could really flip a switch in somebody and want to get revenge on you.
Police quickly realized that this was not a business deal gone bad. They had no evidence to show that Rusty owed anybody money or that he had mishandled anybody's finances, so they pretty much put that to bed.
Just didn't make sense to me. It just seemed too elaborate and too Hollywood, if you know. And Rusty's not the kind of guy that's going to get in any kind of trouble. No criminal history, no anything.
Then this puzzling revelation. In the weeks before he was killed, Rusty Snyderman had called the police for help, not once, but twice.
They came emergency 911. What's the address of the emergency?
There were some previous incidences that were very odd.
About a month before Rusty Snyderman was killed, something strange happened at his house.
My garage door suddenly opened and we're concerned there may be somebody in the garage or in the house. My wife and I are both upstairs and my kids are in bed.
They were panicking a little bit that somebody was trying to break into the house.
Okay, relax. There's nothing to freak out about. The police are here.
Then, about a week before his murder, Rusty calls 911 again. This time, it's more serious.
There was another incident where Rusty was starting to leave his home to go about his day, and he saw somebody behind his air conditioner on the side of his house.
And he notices a gentleman laying down beside his house.
When he confronted the guy ran away down towards the end of the cul-de-sac.
He's running. I think he has a gun in his back pocket, and now he's running away. I don't know who the hell he is, and I don't want him by my house.
In the middle of that call, you could hear Rusty pausing to attend to his son.
I know, but I didn't get your water bottle. I'm sorry. He was wearing a hat and earmuffs, black mustache.
Odd, sure, but a lot of people own guns. And so that's not a direct indicator that the person was looking to kill Rusty.
Police respond to both calls and investigate, but no arrests are made.
It's another clue as part of our investigation, trying to determine, is that related to the fact that he was shot, or is it unrelated? We don't know at that particular point in time.
about a month after the murder, investigators catch a break, uncovering the biggest clue in this entire investigation. A 4,000-pound clue, essentially.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest clue they had in terms of figuring out who did this.
And that's, probably, as far as leads go, our top lead.
And then all of a sudden, the entire investigation shifted.
When they hit on that, it ended up being a goldmine for them.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but Police Chief Billy Grogan and his team will settle for just one clue hidden in those crime scene photos. Anything that leads to the man in the sketch, the black-bearded killer who shot Rusty Snyderman and then escaped in a silver minivan.
Any sort of serious crime like this, you start with the closest people to the victim and work your way out.
Investigators speak with Rusty Snyderman's wife, Andrea, several times.
Do you know anybody that drives a silver minivan?
No, I don't know anyone else that owns a silver minivan.
When they begin looking into this case, police talk to Andrea. What do they learn from her?
Andrea is totally baffled. She doesn't know who would kill her husband, why her husband would be killed. She's very distraught.
So the day after the shooting, Detective Thompson is asking Andrea to try to think of anybody who would have done this. Maybe an enemy of her husband? Somebody with a romantic interest in her?
Has there been anybody recently, when I say recently, within the past year, that has expressed an interest in you?
Yes.
Who?
My boss.
Your boss?
Yes.
Andrea says her boss had made a pass at her and that she turned him down, and that was that.
This is not an individual that would do something like this.
In a follow-up interview the next week, Detective Thompson wants more details.
Let's talk about your boss.
Okay.
How did he approach you with expressing an interest?
We traveled for business together, and we were at dinner, and he said, he thinks I'm fantastic, would love to have a relationship with me, but knows that that's probably unlikely, and that was sort of,
So it was a very polite,
very.
Come on.
He really respected me as a person.
Andrea tells him that she and her boss remained on good terms, that they continued to work closely together.
We're close friends, he and I. Even once he said that, and I said, we work together a lot, travel together a lot. I admire him as a professional. I enjoy learning from him.
As for the idea of her husband cheating on her, according to Andrea, it was laughable.
He doesn't have time to go to the bathroom, let alone have an affair. And he loved me so much and made that clear 1,000,000 times a day. So I laugh because it's
so absurd.
It's absurdly ridiculous.
Detectives now turn back to those ghostly security camera images, the killer's minivan. There's surveillance video that reveals a silver minivan.
Yes.
A 4,000-pound clue, essentially.
Yeah.
The van was the only solid evidence I had of the suspect. I looked at that video so many hours on so many days on the computer just trying to find the fingerprint on that van that'll make it stand out.
How did they go about tracking down this van?
Well, we called the manufacturers of just about every minivan that was, looked similar.
First I went to Ford, I went to Dodge, I went to Honda. The last one I went to, which was a recommendation from one of our patrol officers, was Kia. But, I hadn't thought about Kia. So I went to the Kia dealership.
It was a 2011 Kia Sedona minivan.
The 2011 model of that Kia Sedona minivan had only recently become available.
There was right around 1,000 or so in the entire country. So that was a relief.
And it gets better. The number of 2011 Kia Sedonas sold in Georgia at the time is just a lucky 13.
We're calling every single person that owned one of these vans that is registered to. Everybody has an alibi. Nobody's in Atlanta, nobody's in Dunwoody.
So detectives go back to that videotape. They get it enhanced and they play it on a big screen TV.
And the first time I played it, the first time I saw this were two stickers on the front windshield that were offset from each other. That was my fingerprint. So now I had to figure out, what the hell are those stickers?
And there was a sticker in the window, and it looked like it possibly could be from a rental vehicle.
Turns out that Kia Sedonas were a very popular enterprise rental vehicle. And so when they hit on that, that ended up being a gold mine for them.
So it was this particular rental car company that had this specific vehicle in their fleet.
This leads to another important discovery. By chance, the barcode stickers on the suspect's van had been applied incorrectly. They were offset differently than stickers on other enterprise vehicles.
So they ended up getting the list of all of the 2011 Kia Sedona minivans that were rented on that date and the names of all of the people who had them rented. When they went to the actual locations to look at them, they were able to figure out which van it was based on those stickers because they weren't properly placed. They were like ever so slightly off instead of being parallel across the windshield.
I asked my rental car company contact, hey, when you have this year, make, model vehicle come into any of your lots, let me know. He said, absolutely. And he gave me a call one day, hey, we have a vehicle that might be what you're looking for up in this lot in North Georgia.
Detectives find the windshield stickers match those on the van at the crime scene. And then, bingo. A search of the minivan turns up synthetic hairs, just like those from a costume beard.
Beard fiber would be good evidence because we had several witnesses who said it looked like the suspect was wearing a fake beard.
Police now have the getaway car driven by Rusty Snyderman's killer. And better, they have the name of the person who rented the vehicle. A man by the name of Hemi Newman.
Who had the van on that day? Hemi Newman. I think we found our guy. Don't know why yet, but we found our guy.
Detectives now have their suspect right where they want him, in their interrogation room.
It's as if I'm a suspect. And you're a suspect. Are you a suspect?
The man in the minivan, the man suspected of shooting Rusty Snyderman, is Hemi Newman. It's a name that doesn't ring a bell with police at first.
Now, we're hot on the trail of Hemi Newman. We had to find him. We had to talk to him, see what he wanted to say.
And detectives do what anybody else might do.
I Googled his name and found his LinkedIn resume.
Surprisingly, the suspect, Hemi Newman, is a big executive at GE nearby Marietta. Then, lead detective Thompson gets a call from his bosses.
It's like, hey, we have Hemi. We're going back to the precinct to meet us there. Great. So I rushed back to the precinct. By the time I got back, the sergeant and lieutenant were already in the interview room talking to Hemi.
Not many suspects bring an iPad to an interrogation room, but this one did.
You okay? What? You all right? It's unnerving to be in a room like this.
At the time, the Dunwoody Police Department is in an office tower, the kind of building where ordinarily an executive might feel right at home.
I want to get into the incident with Rusty on that day, November 18th.
You don't expect an executive with GE to be in our interview room, being interviewed about a homicide, but yet he was.
Listen, I'm going to talk to you about the shooting, but as everybody else, I'm going to read you your rights on it. Your Miranda rights. Do I have to worry? I don't think so. I'm not worried.
Newman isn't under arrest. He's there voluntarily. But when police read him his rights, he hesitates.
You understand? You need a lawyer. Do you need a lawyer? I don't know. This is what you need to ask yourself. These questions. Do you feel like asking you questions about Rusty? You know,
not at all. But I have reading me this, and I've never been in a situation.
like this.
The two detectives that were in there, him and another one, were obviously playing off each other, trying to get what they could out of Hemi Newman.
In the beginning, we wanted to see why he had the van.
I mean, this is not rocket science. You're a smart guy. You're not signing away your mortgage.
No, I'm not signing away my mortgage, but this is very uncomfortable.
You're in the business world. You see papers all the time.
I know, but you read Miranda rights, and it seems like it's as if I'm a suspect.
You're a suspect. Are you a suspect?
I don't think I need to be a suspect. I shouldn't be a suspect. There's no reason why I should be a suspect, but you're reading me my rights.
He was very calm. Unusually calm.
I want to know what happened on the 18th. I got to know.
Okay, and I was at work.
I think he was trying to find out what we knew as much as we were trying to find out what he knew.
Do you know why I'm calling you? For help.
I know.
So you answered my call
back.
Right, to help.
Okay. But getting rid of your Miranda rights isn't help. It's saying we can hold anything against you, and I don't know.
Initially, it's gathering a lot of information, but then it gets into the whole crux of the matter, and he's not admitting anything, denying it.
Hemi, this is what we got. We got that van on video the day Rusty shot, and I swear, the more I look at you, the more I see the person inside that van. I'm giving you every opportunity, man. I don't think things should have happened that way. You've got a heart, you've got a soul, man. You're not a criminal. Things just go wrong.
Executives are used to long meetings, but not like this one. A tiny room, one table, two detectives, a fuzzy video camera. It goes on for 5 hours.
You're here because that van was there. We know it was over there where Rusty got shot. Listen, look at me and don't doubt me. I'm telling you what happened. You've got to admit to yourself what happened with that van. I'm telling you, you were there when Rusty got shot. Now, Hemi, you were there. I know you were. Hemi.
How do you know I was there?
Because it's on video. That van is on the video. The van was there. I've got it on video. You're at the parking lot. You're there with Rusty. The question is, why'd you shoot him? Why did it have to get done that way?
One investigator leaves the room and then comes back with photos of that rented minivan caught on camera at the crime scene.
This is the van, okay? And that's your van.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm telling you that
Hemi, look, man,
I'm not there.
As the interview went on, he was looking more and more guilty.
You're telling me you didn't do this? Hemi. Hemi
Newman admits that he had rented a 2011 Kia Sedona on November 18th, but he denies that he drove it to the daycare and murdered Rusty Snyderman.
Are you prepared to tell me now you're not the guy? Because you haven't said that yet. All afternoon, you have not said, I did not damn do it.
You sit here and crowd me. You come up with all this stuff. You're accusing me of something. And it was obvious from the beginning, because I knew you guys were talking about the car, that you're somehow implicating me in this whole thing.
Newman says he's got an alibi, that he was at work at GE the morning Rusty was murdered. But investigators aren't buying it.
At that point, we had all the evidence we needed to place him in the minivan, say that nobody else drove the minivan. I went out and got the arrest warrant for Hemi Newman.
Go ahead and stand up for me. You've been explained to what's taking place tonight. You've been placed under arrest for murder of Mr. Snyder.
Yes. At the same time, while we were finishing the interview, we were confident we had our guy, and we had a whole lot more work to do.
No, it's far from close. You need a probable cause to make an arrest. You need a lot more to get a conviction.
Police say they've got the man who shot Rusty Snyderman, but they still don't know why, what, or who could drive a man like Hemi Newman to kill.
The big question that hung over all of this is what could drive someone to commit murder?
It was becoming more and more clear that there was a lot more to the story.
Placed under arrest for murder of Mr. Snyder.
Why would a late 50s executive wake up one day and kill somebody? gone and gunned somebody down in a parking lot?
A young father of two senselessly murdered, dropping his child off.
This was national attention. You come back to a case that now is swarming.
This is what he did.
The man wanted someone else's wife, so he killed her husband.
The plan included me being there for Andrea after the fact.
He got caught, and all of a sudden he's insane.
I see dead people. They're telling me to kill people.
What was that all about? What was this description of a demon and an angel?
A demon that sounded like Barry White and an angel that sounded like Olivia Newton-John told him to do this? Like, come on.
We're talking about a self-proclaimed delusional individual who killed my husband.
How does she come across?
Not like a grieving widow.
Andrea Snyder, adulterer, liar, and master manipulator.
Where is the evidence that she was a party to the murder of her husband?
When investigators arrest Hemi Newman for gunning down Rusty Snyderman in this parking lot, the question so many are asking is why would a GE executive want to murder a father of two?
He got shot for one of three reasons. Greed, revenge, or lust.
Detectives think they've got their person, but they're searching for which of these age-old motives may have driven Hemi Newman to kill. And they discovered a curious connection between him and Rusty Snyderman's wife, Andrea.
What's your relationship with Andrea? Andrea and I are friends.
Hemi Newman was Andrea Snyderman's boss.
That same boss that Andrea had mentioned to investigators.
How did he approach you with expressing an interest?
He said, he thinks I'm fantastic, would love to have a relationship with me, but knows that that's probably unlikely.
You can only imagine our surprise when we had the paperwork from Enterprise to Google your name and you're her boss.
During the interrogation with police, they pressed him on the nature of his relationship with Andrea Snyderman.
I find her attractive, and I indicated that to her. Then I said, I'd like to continue to develop the relationship. And she basically said, no, I'm committed to Rusty. That ain't gonna happen.
They began to learn that Hemi Newman's marital life was not great. In fact, at the time of the shooting, he had moved out of his home.
Problems in his marriage and Newman's attraction to Andrea Snyderman, all of this and a potential motive for Rusty's murder begins to take shape for police.
Jealousy gets in the heart. Envy takes over. The mind starts working. And that life looks a hell of a lot better than mine right now.
Hemi Newman may have confessed to his feelings for Andrea Snyderman, but when it comes to a confession about his connection to the shooting, that's a different story.
I was not there. I did not pull the trigger on the gun just for Snyder.
At the end of the interview, our detectives arrested Hemi Newman.
You arrest him? That's what I'm saying.
After his arrest, Newman pleads not guilty to a charge of malice murder.
Myself and a detective went to Andrea's house to deliver the news that we had arrested the person who killed her husband.
We've made an arrest on the case.
Are you serious?
We have.
Do you know the person who got me?
Tell us anything else.
Who is it?
Keep on.
Are you kidding me? Please, no.
What did I tell you, buddy?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
The Dunwoody police called me and said we'd made an arrest. And so I said, who? As soon as I knew his name, it just made my skin crawl.
The murder trial for Hemi Newman, the man accused of murdering a father outside his child's daycare center in Dunwoody, is moving fast on this very first day.
All eyes are now on courtroom 5D here in the DeKalb County Courthouse as Hemi Newman's trial is about to begin. But before opening statements, a big surprise. Newman now admits that he killed Rusty Snyderman, but says he's not guilty because he was mentally ill when he committed the crime.
All right. All right, you may be seated. The state may proceed with its opening statement.
Boil it down to a sentence. The man wanted someone else's wife, so he killed her husband. He got caught. And all of a sudden, he's insane.
At this point in time, the defense will have an opportunity to give you their opening statement.
This case is not about what happened.
We know what happened. This case is about why. Hemi was like a puppy in love. He felt that he and Andrea were like soul mates.
Even though Hemi Newman has now admitted to firing the gun that killed Rusty Snyderman, prosecutors still need to lay out their case. So they begin by tracking his movements the day of the shooting, beginning with his morning at GE before sunrise.
He's up in his office at 5:30 something. Turns on his computer, does a few things, and without using the elevator, exits. Defendant used the stairs and went out an unmanned back door. The cameras in the employee parking garage. They caught the defendant leaving in a silver Sedona Kia van.
Prosecutors argue that just 2 hours after Hemi Newman shot and killed Rusty Snyderman, he fills up his rental car with gas, returns it, and then heads back to work in his own car.
You even got video in there. Dressed the same as he arrived at home.
Chris Lang, CHRI.
Then prosecutors called Chris Lang to the stand. He was in the parking lot that morning, and in a dramatic display, DA Robert James demonstrates how Snyderman was shot.
There's a person that just comes out of nowhere and shoots him several times.
If you're laying on your stomach, with your head towards me, okay. Where you are there, the shooter would have been right here.
We never did find the weapon that was used, but I guess we had the next best thing.
Say your spelling name for the record.
My name is Jan Da Silva.
Jan Da Silva was important in the trial as well.
Yeah, Jan was able to connect the dots because we could show that it looks like he committed the murder, but we didn't have a murder weapon.
Can you tell us where you actually listed the gun? There was a website.
Mr. Da Silva said he'd sold a Bersa 40 caliber Thunder pistol. I showed him the lineup, and he immediately identified Hemi Newman as the person he sold the gun to.
Do you know who the person was that contacted you? Yes, sir. What was his name? Hemi Newman.
I asked him, do you still have the test fire casing that comes with the gun when they sell it to you?
Typically, after somebody buys a gun, it comes with what's called a test fire casing, a spent bullet that essentially proves that the gun has been tested and works properly. Jan Da Silva said he actually had given that casing to his girlfriend, and luckily for investigators, she still had it. Prosecutors say that souvenir shell casing matches the bullet casings found at the crime scene, linking the gun to the murder.
What would have been about a week after he sold the gun to Hemi, Hemi came back up to the restaurant where Jan Da Silva was working as a valet.
He started off by saying, don't ever have a mistress. Don't ever have a mistress. Yes, sir.
And Newman tells Jan Da Silva something else about that gun he'd recently sold him.
He told me he just touched it on the leg linear, and that he was okay because he made sure that it was touching somewhere where nobody can find it.
What does this all begin to tell them about Hemi Newman?
This was a massive cover-up.
Hi, Mr. Deputy. We're in recess till 1 tomorrow morning.
A well-planned cover-up and proof, according to prosecutors, that Hemi Newman was very much in his right mind when he planned this murder. But now his trial is about to take a truly bizarre turn, one that includes some of the world's most famous musical names.
To the latest twist in the so-called daycare murder trial, a Georgia man accused of gunning down his romantic rival.
Tell me how intense this was. This was national attention.
It's the most intense case I've ever been involved with, and I've tried high-profile cases.
Bring him out, jury, please.
The prosecution painted Hemi Newman as a lying, cheating man who was faking his mental illness, who wanted Rusty Snyderman out of the picture so that he could marry Andrea Snyderman, take their money and her children, and ride off into the sunset.
Hemi was all those things came out. In his interrogation, he was unhappy in his relationship with his wife.
You have all these expenses, and we have no money. I told my wife, I said, we don't have any money. We're broke.
The defense, meantime, painted a picture of a troubled man with undiagnosed bipolar disorder who had a traumatic childhood.
The answer of why in this case, it actually begins with Hemi's father.
His father was a concentration camp survivor, very
difficult man, very distant man, not very loving. Our belief was because of his bipolar disorder, he didn't have the capacity to know right from wrong at the time of the shooting of Rusty Snyderman.
To counter that argument, the state shows jurors videos of 2 different evaluations of Hemi Newman with a court-appointed psychiatrist.
What I've been told that I need to do, and that's that Rusty needs to die.
And this is where the trial takes a truly bizarre turn.
During the summer of 2010, the defendant claims that he was visited by a 6-foot dark demon. Also, he claims a 6-foot bright white angel came to him.
Is it a low voice, a high voice? Is it deep? Or is it very white?
That's right. According to Newman, the demon in his head sounded like the R&B legend behind hits like Never Never Gonna Give You Up, voice of the angel.
The Australian lady in Greece, what's her name? Yes.
That's the best way he could describe it so that we could understand what he was saying.
What was that all about?
There are essentially 2 ways you can be acquitted if you commit a crime and you claim that you're insane. One way is what we call the right from wrong test, that you were so far gone that you don't understand the difference between right and wrong. The other way, which was the centerpiece of this trial, is that you were suffering from a delusion that compelled you to do the act.
When he comes, I think he's real. Okay. Do you think he's real now? But what do you think he is? No, I'm talking to you and sort of analyzing it. Yeah. Probably not.
Hemi Newman's defense says that part of his psychosis was a belief that Rusty Snyderman's children were actually his, and that he needed to kill Rusty to protect them.
The plan included me being there for Andrea after the fact.
Okay.
It wasn't only killing Rusty, but also the protection and being there for the children.
Hemi's goal in shooting Rusty was to save Rusty's children from the same kind of torment that he himself experienced as a child. He thought he was doing the right thing by killing Rusty to save his children.
And during those recorded interviews, Newman makes some surprising allegations about his relationship with Andrea.
We get a very brief, it was just a very brief kiss. That was it. And then I told her, I said, you're going to regret this.
Newman also discusses a business trip he says he took with Andrea, where he claims they ended up alone in a hotel room watching a movie together.
I was already pretty late. She put on her pajamas, I put on my pajamas, and we decided to watch the movie in bed. And we came into bed. And you had your clothes. No. And then I went back to my bed.
Andrea denies this ever happened, and Hemi Newman continues to maintain that he and Andrea never had a sexual relationship. But prosecutors think there could have been another motive: money.
Rusty Snyderman had a couple $1 million life insurance policy that really became a focal point for investigators.
He wanted Rusty's life, and he wanted Rusty's wife. He wanted the money because they're wealthy. The house was paid for. I think the house at the time was worth almost $1 million.
State calls Andrea Snyderman, Judge.
It's becoming clear that at this trial, there's one person everybody wants to hear from.
Do you have any idea why the defendant had these feelings toward you?
I think I'm a pretty nice person.
And when Andrea Snyderman takes the witness stand, it's a very hot seat.
Do you know why Mr. Newman would have emailed a friend that you finally gave in?
No, I don't. We're talking about a self-proclaimed delusional individual who killed my husband. More than 70 people would testify in Hemi Newman's trial, but the star witness undeniably is Rusty Snyderman's widow, Andrea. Once she takes her seat here, things quickly turn hostile.
State calls Andrea Snyderman, Judge.
Did the defendant ever express his feelings for you?
Yes.
Do you have any idea why the defendant would have these feelings toward you?
I think I'm a pretty nice person. I'm a very caring person.
Were you and the defendant romantically
But for the next 2 days, the nature of Andrea Snyderman's relationship with her boss takes center stage at trial. Prosecutors going over details about their business trips together, reading from some very unbusiness-like emails between them.
It's about how you felt when we looked at the stars in Tahoe, when we woke up Friday morning in Denver, when we walked out of the restaurant on Thursday, when you took my hand and nestled your head on my shoulder. Okay?
Yeah.
Did that happen?
Did what happen?
Did you wake up together in Denver and Tahoe?
No.
Even so, Andrea testifies that when she and her boss traveled together, she allowed him into her hotel rooms 2 times. But she says that was before she realized Newman was stalking her.
Did he stalk you from inside your own room?
Stalking can take on many different meanings.
So that's a yes.
He was there to spend time with me.
In your
Evidently.
room? In your room?
Yeah, he didn't share a room with me. Was he in my room? Might have been for a little while, but didn't share a room with me.
And whether Andrea recognized it or not, it seemed that Newman's behavior was becoming more and more unpredictable. Remember that 911 call Rusty made to police about a strange man lurking outside his home?
I don't know who the hell he is, and I don't want him by my house.
Turns out, that was Hemi Newman, an admission he eventually made during one of his mental health evaluations.
I told Hemi, I told like 6 other people also what happened on the side of my house, because it was bizarre and scary.
Normally, when you're called as a prosecution witness, you're there to help their case. They treat you nicely. They treated her as a hostile witness from the get-go.
I had no choice but to continue my career and my job.
Andrea Snyderman was defiant because both sides were coming at her, full bore.
The stalker that you've now testified about, you picked him up at the airport.
Yeah.
You flew home with him.
That's correct.
You changed seats to sit next to him.
That's how we always traveled.
In one of the emails, she talks to Hemi about feeling like she's betrayed her family and expressing remorse over actions.
Return to the second page of that email.
Yep.
Hemi Newman says, please never forget how much I love you. And how did you respond?
I know, but so do other people. I betrayed them all. I'm not sure how to deal with that for now, but my burden, not yours.
What happened in Greenville, man?
We were holding each other's hands, and that's it. It may sound worse than it is, but to me, that was a betrayal.
So you're repenting in the email, at least, from holding his hand?
Yep.
She was pushing back on these allegations, and she wanted people to know unequivocally, I had nothing to do with this, I didn't have an affair, I didn't betray my husband, certainly didn't want him dead.
You know why Mr. Newman would have emailed a friend that you finally gave in.
No, I don't. We're talking about a self-proclaimed delusional individual who killed my husband. No, I don't question anything that he sent to anyone.
Here you have this widow of the victim adamantly saying that something did not happen. And yet, both sides, the attorneys, were arguing that it did.
One witness after another takes the stand to testify about what they claim was the nature of the relationship between Hemi Newman and Andrea Snyderman. The jury even hears from a bartender in South Carolina who recalls serving the pair.
What stood out most was that he kept spinning her around to the salsa music. I know at one point she kind of was dancing for him. He pulled her back, groped her. They were groping each other, I know, because I kind of turned away.
At any time did you see the parties kiss?
Yes, I did.
How many did they kiss?
I would say about 3 times.
Andrea is also asked about this trip, but says she remembers certain details differently.
We had some drinks at the bar, maybe 1, 2.
Did you dance?
I got onto the dance floor myself.
Did you dance with the defendant?
He came to join, and there was a time where he reached out his hand and twirled me around, and that's it.
Did you kiss him or did he kiss you?
No. No.
Looking at her testimony, it was sort of hard to remember who was on trial.
Yeah.
Whether it was Andrea Snyderman or Hemi Newman.
Yeah.
You all went after her, and the defense went after her.
Yes. Yeah. We had to because we had to establish motive.
How does she come across to the jury?
Not like a grieving widow. Dishonest, disingenuous, a liar.
And there's something else that stands out for prosecutors, something they see as a discrepancy in Andrea's story about the day Rusty was shot.
Andrea Snyderman testified she didn't know Rusty had been shot until she got to the hospital.
At the time you called Don Snyderman, at that time, did you know what had happened to Rusty?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know what happened to Rusty until I got to the emergency room.
Okay.
No one told me what happened to Rusty.
Rusty's own father and one of her friends testified that she called them to say that Rusty had been shot.
She called and said Rusty had been shot. She was so sorry. And that she was going to Dunwoody Prep to find out what had happened.
And are you sure that she told you that Rusty had been shot?
Yes, sir.
She immediately screaming to me that Rusty had been shot and she didn't know if he was dead or alive, and she was on the way to the hospital.
Again, Andrea denies that happened. And that same friend also testified about what she knew about Andrea's relationship with Hemi Newman.
Did Andrea admit or deny an affair with her boss at that time after the murder?
Denied it.
Based on all the time you've known Andrea, based on your observations of her, her mannerisms, when she told you no, did you believe her?
No, but my heart really wanted to.
And when Citron leaves the stand, there's another unforgettable moment in the courtroom.
Andrea went up and hugged her friend, who had just testified that she didn't believe her when she said she wasn't having an affair. So it was very strange.
It was so jarring that the attorneys made a motion to have her removed from the courthouse, and the judge obliged and barred her from the rest of the trial.
With all the allegations swirling around Andrea Snyderman, the question so many are asking, is the grieving widow on her way to becoming a criminal defendant?
It's clear to me Andrea's covered in Rusty's blood.
Everybody was wondering, what's next with Andrea?
Dramatic closing arguments in the daycare murder trial.
Just what motivated Hemi Newman to kill a man outside of that Georgia daycare depends on who you believe.
The murder trial for Hemi Newman is moving fast.
The jury could have this case as early as tomorrow afternoon.
As prosecutors and defense lawyers begin final arguments in the case against Hemi Newman, the two sides have one thing in common. They're scathing accusations against Andrea Snyderman.
Both sides claimed that she was an evil woman who played a role in her husband's death.
Either the angel and the demon were talking to Hemi and telling Hemi to kill Rusty, or the demon that he was cheating with.
The gun, in this case, was in Hemi's hand. But the trigger, I respectfully suggest, was pulled by Andrea Snyderman.
You had the defense team saying that she knew full well that Hemi Newman had mental illness, and she was sort of pushing him to do this. Even if she didn't expressly say, go kill my husband, her actions led him to do that.
Adulterer, liar, and master manipulator.
They were laying it all at her feet.
Yes, our theories were very, very close. They were saying she led him all the way up to it, but didn't necessarily plan it. And we were saying, yeah, she was the motive for it, but we believe she perhaps had something to do with it as well.
Hemi didn't hide his crime from Andrea because Andrea already knew it.
As soon as this murder had taken place, she called Hemi Newman. She calls Hemi multiple times. On her way to the hospital, we thought that was extremely odd behavior.
She told everybody that listened that Rusty's been shot, but yet she wasn't told until she got to that hospital 2 hours later. The only way she would know that is if he told her.
Andrea says she called her boss for more innocent reasons, to tell him that something had happened to Rusty and that she'd left the office.
Rusty deserved to be treated with some respect and dignity. He did not deserve to be shot down in the street like some stray dog.
Robert James was forceful, he was loud, he would point.
This is what
he was putting on a show, saying, no, he's lying about this mental illness. This was an affair. They both wanted him out of the picture.
They would have us believe that he's insane because he's having a good time at the club. And Andrea's doing this dance for him, and she's, and they're groping, and they're grinding, and they're getting it on, and they're kissing and hugging. He's having an affair. He's about to go back to the room and do the horizontal mumbo. What man in America wouldn't be like, "Ooh, I'm about to have sex. It's great. Of course he's having a good time." If that makes him insane, then half the
nobody is insane that plans a murder this way in the cover-up.
He knew he was wrong, and that makes him guilty, that makes him guilty, that makes him guilty all day, every day, because he is sane and he knew the difference between right and wrong.
Any minute now, Judge Gregory Adams should bring the jury in for that verdict. There was never any question that he was going to be found guilty of something because he admitted to shooting Rusty Snyderman. The question was, would he be found guilty but mentally ill, or not guilty by reason of insanity?
Would he be sentenced to prison or to a mental hospital?
Deputy Moore, bring in the jury.
After deliberating for 8 hours, the jury is back with a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant as to count 1, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
We were devastated because he still goes into the prison system instead of a mental hospital.
Just come up here, Mr. Newman.
He had not testified at trial, and I think he wanted to be heard.
Your Honor, I prepared this statement to express my sense of loss for the death of Rusty Snyderman. I'm so sorry for their loss.
He apologized to his own, family, his children.
It is also a tragedy for countless family and friends who saw a person they loved, admired, and respected, who saw him arrested in shame.
He talked about himself.
It was sort of all about him. Kind of felt like, woe was me, I'm sorry I got caught.
Ultimately, the judge sentenced Hemi Newman to life without parole. Throughout this case, Rusty Snyderman's family, specifically his brother Steve, were at the forefront. He was kind of the family spokesperson, and he didn't mince his words.
It's clear to me that Andrea is covered in Rusty's blood, and we'll have no peace until everyone involved in Rusty's death is held accountable for their actions.
Andrea Snyderman releases a statement saying she was, quote, grateful for and relieved by the verdict, and describing her husband as an amazing man.
Everybody was wondering, what's next with Andrea? She took the stand in that bombastic way. Everybody thought that she had something to do with this. The question was, would police and prosecutors go after her? And about 5 months later, we got our answer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jovita Moore.
I'm Justin Farmer, and officers arrested Andrea Snyderman today at her family's home in Putnam County.
As soon as that indictment came down, those marshals pulled Andrea Snyderman out of her parents' lake house and hauled her off to jail.
She is facing charges, including the murder of her husband, Rusty Snyderman.
In layman's terms, if you help, you can be charged like the person that did it.
After Andrea's arrest, the jury foreperson in Hemi Newman's trial speaks out.
She was very angry when she was on the stand, and I thought, there's something. She really is hiding something here.
We don't know how she's involved, but she's involved. And we need to know, how can we have any peace when we don't know the truth?
But what can the prosecution prove?
Lies throughout the investigation and throughout the trial.
Then a bombshell development in Andrea's case before her trial even begins.
When the indictment itself came out and charged Andrea with malice murder, a lot of people were surprised.
I always had empathy for her, but, at the same time, there were all of these unanswered questions. And so, those unanswered questions you want answers to.
You hit her with an array of charges.
Correct. We charged her with murder, obstruction, false statements, perjury.
Are you thinking that you're going to be able to put her behind bars for possibly life as well?
Yeah. I have some very strong circumstantial evidence, right? She's calling the murderer, who she happens to be having an affair with, moments after she finds out that her husband is shot. And then the night before the murder, there was a search on the computer for death benefits. The question is, do we have enough evidence that we can go from she probably had something to do with it to she did have something to do with it?
Where is the evidence that she was a party to the murder of her husband? All you have is that she may have lied about having an affair. That doesn't mean she had anything to do with her husband being murdered.
Indictments are built on solid foundations of evidence, and this one will fall like a pillar of salt.
After 3 weeks in jail, Andrea Snyderman is released on bail and pleads not guilty to all charges.
Anything you want to say just about how much you're looking forward to seeing your children?
The judge put her under house arrest. She couldn't even take her children to school.
On the eve of her murder trial, nearly a year after she was arrested, Andrea Snyderman's in court when the DA drops a bombshell.
I'm standing before the court, standing before millions of people perhaps, asking for the court to dismiss the case right before trial.
Robert James, the DA, had to go in front of the judge and admit that he did not have enough evidence to proceed with a murder case against Andrea Snyderman.
I believe that it would be unjust and unethical to go forward on a charge that I am not 100% sure someone is guilty of.
That can't look good for your office, though.
Oh, it looked terrible.
How hard was that for you, and how often does that happen?
It doesn't happen very often. If you say that the prosecutor is a minister of justice, then you have to own that it's not what you know, quite frankly, it's what you can prove.
Murder charges against Andrea may have been dropped.
Mr. Deputy, bring in the jurors.
But in August of 2013, prosecutors moved forward with her other charges, including lying on the stand and hindering the investigation into her husband's murder.
Across the board, we believe that she lied to police and she lied on the stand.
She hid evidence and she concealed it. She remained silent. She didn't tell them that she was a willing participant with Hemi Newman in this relationship. The fact that she called Hemi and the fact that she texted Hemi, she hid from the police. She suspected him immediately, but she hid her suspicion.
Her husband wound up dead, not because of anything she did. She didn't hide it. She didn't conceal it. She didn't know about it in advance. She did not try to deny the relationship. She gave them his name, and she has cooperated time and time and time and time again.
Was there a concern that Hemi Newman might testify against her?
I kept thinking up to the day we were going to start trial that we would find out there's this new surprise witness, but that never happened.
I was hoping Hemi would point a finger at Andrea to lessen his sentence. He never considered that option. Hemi continued to express his love for her.
After 2 weeks of testimony and multiple witnesses,
Excuse me, Deputy Garrett, if you could bring in the jury, please.
the jury has a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Andrea Snyderman, count 1, hindering the apprehension of a criminal, guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty.
Ultimately, Andrea Snyderman is convicted of 9 out of 13 counts against her. Just 18 months after testifying at Hemi Newman's trial, Andrea Snyderman is right back in this courtroom, this time for her own sentencing. She tearfully denies ever having had an affair with her boss, asking the court for leniency.
Please let me go home to my kids. Mr. Newman changed my children's lives forever by killing their father. Please don't let them live without their mother. Thank you.
She blamed it on Hemi, and she was the victim. She's not a victim.
Self-preservation is the only thing on her mind. She lied to her family. She lied to her friends. She lied to us. It was more important for this criminal to protect herself rather than find and convict her husband's killer. We urge you to keep the results of her conduct that led her to lie in the forefront of your deliberations.
The judge gave her 5 years in prison, and she's out in 10 months.
With credit for time served both in jail and under house arrest, Snyderman is released on parole. And just when everyone thought the final chapter in the saga had been written, a new twist sees a very different-looking Hemi Newman back in court. In 2015, nearly 5 years after Rusty Snyderman's murder, Hemi Newman's conviction is thrown out, the Georgia Supreme Court finding that there was a violation of attorney-client privilege related to some of Newman's mental health evaluations.
The prosecution had no right to subpoena experts that we hired that we did not intend to call as witnesses.
A DeKalb County judge set Hemi Newman's retrial.
This retrial is expected to last less than a month. Insanity is at the center of Newman's fate.
In court, the formerly clean-cut GE executive appears markedly different.
Hemi Newman became Orthodox. So when he showed up to court, he was donning the Orthodox beard. He was wearing a yarmulke.
Once again, Newman's defense is arguing that delusions drove him to kill Rusty Snyderman.
You will come to the right verdict, and that is that Hemi Newman is not guilty by reason of insanity.
The jury doesn't buy it, once again finding Newman guilty and sentencing him to life in prison without parole.
Hemi will never get out of prison. He's gonna live his life regretting his actions, regretting that he has no relationship with his own children, regretting that he lost everything.
As for Andrea Snyderman, she's out of prison and no longer has a criminal record, thanks to a Georgia law called the First Offender Act that focuses on nonviolent crimes.
Even though a jury has found her guilty, when a defendant is sentenced under the First Offender Act, as Andrea was, once you have completed the sentence, you have no record. Andrea Snyderman, wherever she is today, under Georgia law, is not a convicted criminal.
So she essentially is a woman who has a clean record.
Yes. Once you have served out your sentence, probation included, then, your sins, your crimes are erased from the record. And she wasn't given special treatment. She just wasn't treated any worse than anyone else.
It was extremely tragic. There are crazy people out there, and Hemi Newman's one of them. And her path crossed with his, and she will regret it the rest of her life.
Rusty was a wonderful brother. He was a great father. Sophia and Ian adored their father, and they were the light of his life. Every single day of our lives, there will be a hole in our hearts, in our lives where Rusty should be.
The Snyderman family, they really just at the heart of all of it wanted this to be about Rusty and his life and his love for his kids. And I think that was the heartbreaking part of all of this, is that they were just wanting justice for Rusty.
In my dreams, he comes waltzing through the door, just like he always did.
We miss him. He was the light in our life.
He had so much more to offer the world. The world is so much poorer because he's not here.
Rusty and Andrea Snyderman's two children are now 16 and 19 years old.
And Andrea Snyderman successfully petitioned to have her last name changed, as well as those of her two children. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
A woman's body had been found in a drainage ditch. It soon became clear that this was sinister.
There was a ligature around the neck. This is homicidal strangulation.
There was real fear. Women were having to look over their shoulder at night. Anyone in Porthmadog at that time could have been the killer.
It could be one person, or it could have been more than one.
They suddenly announced that they had arrested a man, and soon came the dramatic development. It was someone within the community.
But the witness might have been mistaken in the identification of the person responsible. A lot of people believed that he was innocent.
Was there a serial killer on the loose in Porthmadog?
Nestled on the picturesque Glaslyn Estuary in North Wales is the charming harbour town of Porthmadog.
Porthmadog is a coastal town. It had been in the 19th and 20th centuries a working port where slate from the North Wales slate mines were ferried to Porthmadog and from Porthmadog all over the world. It was famous for that.
Porthmadog has a population of about 5,000 people. It's a little Welsh town. It's the Welsh-speaking heartland of North Wales.
It's a lovely part of the world. It thrives on primarily tourism. It has a very close community where most people know everybody else. The majority of people that live in Porthmadog live there all their lives and don't move away.
Some people would still keep their front door unlocked. People were trusted, and it was the last place that you would expect such a dreadful event to happen.
It was one of my days off, visiting Liverpool, and it was in the afternoon that my phone rang. It was the control room inspector to tell me that a body had been found in Porthmadog and that units were at the scene and they believed that it was suspicious. Unfortunately, this was my worst nightmare regarding location because I was at least 3 hours drive away. But I was made aware that the helicopter was going to be in the area, and it was arranged that I drove to Prestatyn and jumped on the helicopter, which conveyed me to the scene.
The body of a woman has been found face down in a drainage ditch, known locally as the Cut.
The person had been walking along, seen the body in the water, and raised the alarm. I was not informed of who she was because it was unclear at that time. All we know is that it was a young lady.
This cut is essentially a water-filled deep drainage ditch which has a certain degree of tidal current in it, washing in and out.
The location of the woman's body means that it is a race against time for the forensic team.
Your first concern with a body in these kind of circumstances is how much of the forensics is going to be lost.
If you've got a scene where there's running water, then you need to work expeditiously. There's a real kind of urgency to remove a body and take a body away from that water body so that we can recover evidence before it's been washed away.
The body was a crime scene, so you need the body out of there as fast as possible.
The crime scene manager, she informed me that a doctor had already been out and had pronounced the victim dead. And on turning over the body that was still in the water at that time, they found that a scarf was placed around her neck and that at the end of the scarf had been forced down into her mouth.
Once the pathologist was able to inspect the body and see that there were features that were not in keeping with an accidental death, then that triggered a completely different track for the investigation. We're now in a possible murder situation.
This is homicidal strangulation. She wasn't suspended from anything. It wasn't self-suspension. There were injuries to the body, bruises. So it was quite clearly a homicide.
Also, that there was a part of her clothing was disturbed, which it led us to believe that there was a sexual side of this attack. Identifying who the victim is naturally a priority because we need to inform the relatives. We didn't know at that time whether the person was a local or someone there on a holiday. It was my suspicion, bearing in mind the location, and it was close to local housing, that it was unlikely to be a sort of tourist. It wasn't the tourist part of town, but we didn't know.
As police and CSI descend on the small seaside town, locals are becoming increasingly alarmed.
Word soon gets around. It really did shock the community. Something of this magnitude hadn't happened to a local girl that I can remember. And then obviously the police activity in the area became obvious to the locals, and this huge inquiry started.
I was informed that a brother had come to the cordon and raised the alarm that his sister was missing.
The young man who is concerned for his sister lives nearby.
Well, once a brother had come to the cordon and said that his sister was missing and gave a description of his sister, which effectively matched the young lady that we'd found. Officers dispatched to the house and questioned the family more in depth regarding identifying marks, tattoos, clothing, the general description of her. The information from the family is that their daughter had a tattoo, and when the body was examined, we found that tattoo on the body. The formal identification would come later, but we were as sure as you could be that we knew who it was.
The body is confirmed to be that of 22-year-old Fionn Wynne Roberts.
Fionn was a care worker. She also had another part-time job
at the football club.
She was a popular member of the community, kind, loving, she was described as. She had ambitions to join the army as a nurse.
And she lived in Porthmadog all her life. She was just a regular young lady. This is an open book at this stage. We wanted to know who she had been with that night. Had she travelled home alone? So the inquiries were in the locations that she'd been and the people that she'd been in with. Who was the last person that was seen with her, or we believed to be with her? So at this point, we're totally blind. We've only just found the body. We've only just found the family. So we had no information whether she'd been with anybody that evening, and we have to backtrack, in the first instance, at least 24 hours.
Just a few hours before her body was discovered, Fionn had been enjoying a night at the pub with her parents.
On the evening before, she'd been out celebrating with the family, and on a Saturday evening had been doing what most young people do, socialising with friends in the town.
Fionn's father is the first to go home, leaving Fionn and her mum drinking at a pub in nearby Tremadog. At around 2 a.m, Fionn's mum returns home, and then 2 hours later, Fionn decides to make the short walk home alone.
At that time, in Porthmadog, I would hasten to say that the vast majority of people, if not all the people, felt extremely safe at walking around at night. And it was not unusual for young ladies to walk home and feel safe. And Fionn obviously felt safe enough to walk home on her own. Others had offered to go home with her, and she had decided no, she was safe enough, and she left for the journey home herself. So I think she was going home, not having any worries at all, because at that stage, I don't think people did in that small rural town.
This was the last time Fionn Wynne Roberts would be seen alive. In the town of Porthmadog, North Wales, police are investigating the murder of local woman Fionn Wynne Roberts.
In a small community like that, it is a major, major shock. From people who felt remarkably safe going about their day-to-day business, suddenly a horrendous crime like this has been committed in their local town.
Fionn's body has been found in a drainage ditch in a residential area.
Where the body was found was within a couple of 100 yards at the very most from her home address. She was nearly home.
It appears that Fionn has been strangled with her own scarf, and as pathologists examine the body, further alarming details start to emerge.
It's quite obvious this is homicidal ligature strangulation. The scarf was particularly tight around the neck with the knot on one side, and then from the knot it was the rest of the scarf that had been put into her mouth and throat. It may have been done by the assailant to stop her screaming or crying out. And she had all the changes associated with that. So, for example, she had obvious petechial hemorrhages, pinpoint-sized, tiny red hemorrhages. And in the skin of the face, so you've got two components. You've got the compression effect around the neck of the ligature itself and the airway obstruction, both combining to cause asphyxiation.
As the post-mortem continues, it reveals the horrifying details of Fionn's last moments.
She was still alive when she went into that water. Now, she may well have been unconscious and dying from the ligature strangulation, but she was still breathing. There were breaths. You only have to inhale a few times or suck water into your lungs. My lungs were hyper-expanded, full of fluid. Cause of death was a combination of ligature strangulation and drowning.
Fionn had suffered a swift but brutal attack.
Fionn had injuries to the lips. There were bruises and laceration. Some of those may have been caused by direct punches to the lips. She also had bruises to her face, bruising to an eye, so she had definitely been struck by her assailant.
So unexpected was the attack that it seems Fionn did not have the chance to fight back.
So as a forensic pathologist, we'd always be looking for any injuries which suggest that the victim has fought off an attacker. Usually they'd be to the arms if someone is being attacked with a weapon, for example. In Fion's case, there were no defensive injuries. The lack of defensive injuries suggests that maybe she was incapacitated very quickly, taken by surprise. So, did Fion suffer? I think it was probably extremely quick, so she probably didn't know much about it.
As the days pass, pressure is mounting on Detective Superintendent Challoner and his team.
You've got to look at it with clear eyes, because the objective is to find the truth and to find the offender. Everybody that came into contact with Fion for 24 hours, everybody in the pub, everybody that was out and about that night, and all those people are interviewed. So you're talking about hundreds of statements being taken. What we're trying to do is to identify everybody's movements at the relevant times in Porthmadog, because one or more of them was the offender.
Anyone in Porthmadog at the time could have been the killer.
It could be one person, or it could have been more than one. We knew that a handbag was missing. So I am deciding on what is the priority about searching and expanding that search area, especially as this is a water flow and evidence may have moved down that.
And then there is a breakthrough.
That handbag was found by one of the search teams, but what I would describe as a sluice gates, which stops the estuary water coming in and flooding all these waterways. And what had been discovered there was a handbag and items of clothes. There was a set of trousers and there was a training shoe found. It is our belief that the offender had discarded them, hoping that the water in the estuary had washed them out and they'd never been recovered. But the person's aim hadn't been good and they'd been caught on the top of the gate and remained there.
Now all they had to do was find who wore them that night, who owned them. The police, they spoke to nearly 5,000 people in the area. They issued leaflets, they made appeals. They wanted to know who owned these items of clothing and the shoe.
But the police appeals for information regarding the owner of the clothes do not prove fruitful, so all hope lies in forensics.
So the process of examining the tracksuit bottoms is that we lay them flat onto an examination bench, and then we start to methodically recover any evidence that might be present. So that might include any body fluids, any DNA, and we're also looking on the surface for things like hairs and fibres. And in this particular case, that process recovered dog hairs from the clothing. So it's likely the owner of these tracksuit bottoms owns a dog. If we can recover DNA from it, and we then identify a dog that we think that hair might have originated from, we can take a small mouth swab from that dog, recover its reference DNA profile, and compare it to the hair that we recovered from the tracksuit bottoms.
And then the investigation turns in a direction that stuns the community in Porthmadog.
So often the answer to who murdered someone lies close to home.
Phone inquiries reveal Fion's brother had rung her 19 times in a short period of time on the night of her murder. Something which raised concerns due to their relationship.
There was much more than ordinary sibling rivalry between Fion and her brother. There were long periods of time when they didn't get on.
On the night in question, her brother was drinking with friends in a car park. And police also focused on the whereabouts of Fion's father.
He had no alibi because he'd been to the same party as his wife and daughter, but had left early. So he left a pub called the Sportsman's at about 1 o'clock in the morning, so I was home by about 1:30, and so was a suspect in the sense that he had no alibi for the crucial few hours.
Less than a month after Fion's body had been found, her father and brother are arrested on suspicion of her murder.
And I made an appropriate decision to have them arrested so that they could be interviewed formally under caution.
Police in North Wales are investigating the homicide of 22-year-old Fionn Wynne Roberts. Items that detectives believe belong to the killer have been found, and Fionn's brother and father remain in custody, arrested on suspicion of her murder.
It must have set tongues wagging in a small community. It must have been very difficult to live in Porthmadog at that time, knowing that questions were being asked. Were you responsible for what happened to Fionn?
But just days before Fionn's funeral, having been interviewed at length by police, both are suddenly released.
The clothing, the trousers and the training shoe and Fionn's bag, the forensic analysis and the DNA recovered from that did not match her brother or her father.
The police got back their DNA results. It wasn't Fionn's brother. It wasn't Fionn's father. It was someone else. It felt as though it was back to square one. There was pressure on the police to solve this crime. The councillor was even calling for a new investigation team at one stage. So there was real pressure to solve a seemingly random killing in a small town. There was real fear in the community. Women were having to look over their shoulder at night. They were being advised to not walk alone. Was there a serial killer on the loose? Was there a serial attacker on the loose? This was, a cause of major local concern.
Both locals and police are highly aware that a killer is still at large, and Detective Superintendent Peter Challoner has his own fears.
An offender goes on to offend again, and it is always a risk that if they get away with one crime, they'll commit another.
Desperate for the investigation to move forward, the police need help from the public.
We were still focused on finding out the person whose DNA we had found on those clothes. We were able to offer a reward of £10,000 for information leading to the offender. The local businessman had offered to pay half the reward.
1 month after her death, Fionn's funeral is held at Capel Salem, Porthmadog.
500 people turned up at her funeral. Shops closed. There was support for her family, her devastated family in this hour of need and grief.
As Fionn's community grieve her loss, the investigation into her murder continues.
We weren't getting a lot of success from our appeals. We weren't getting closer to the individual responsible. And one of the aspects of an inquiry like this is that we try to make best use of the media.
There's a need to keep the public interest in what had happened in Porthmadog, to try and catch the killer. TV, press, radio, newspapers came down. This was everyone's worst nightmare, and the killer was still at large somewhere. And the police felt that the answer lay in the local community, that they would find the killer somewhere in the Porthmadog area.
And because of that broadcast, there was a woman in South Wales contacted the major investigation team and told us that 20 years previously, when she was in Porthmadog, there was a similar attack in the same area.
The attack 2 decades earlier had happened just yards from the location that Fionn's handbag had been found.
The young lady had left her place of work and saw a man apparently molesting a woman, and she shouted to him and he ran away.
Quite an astonishing development in the case. This woman had come across another woman in broad daylight who was crying and seemingly about to be attacked with a stone. This was a key evidence for the police. The eyewitness knew this local man. She named him. Checking back through their records, police are able to see that a court case had been held in the local magistrate's court for assault. A man had been fined, ordered to pay compensation.
The man connected to the attack in Porthmadog 20 years previously is 55-year-old local factory worker Iestyn Davies.
Once the name came in, together with the history of what he was alleged to have done 20 years previously, that was a very similar set of circumstances to the attack on Fionn, and plus it was in the same location. So immediately he became a person of interest. A plan was put together to arrest him and to retrieve his DNA.
11 weeks after the discovery of her body, Iestyn Davies is arrested on suspicion of the murder of Fionn Wynne Roberts.
For the family, this must have been a relief, for the finger was at last not being pointed in their direction.
News of the arrest sends shockwaves through the tiny Welsh town.
You might have expected whoever was responsible to have been a stranger who was visiting this small town in Gwynedd. Not Iestyn Davies, a man who was brought up in the area. He lived nearby. He was hiding in plain sight.
He lived certainly all of his adult life in that community, and he was very well known. And there were people who, for example, had played games with him, either darts or football. At the time, he was working at a wood factory, and that was local to the area, very close to where things happened.
Iestyn Davies lived near the family. He knew Fionn. And it came as a real shock to the community that someone within Porthmadog could be accused of such a grave act, such an awful, dreadful killing.
He was arrested, his DNA was taken, a police rider was on hand to escort that forensic example of his DNA to the lab. They did an examination and reported back that we had a match. The match of that DNA was from the sample inside Fionn's bag.
So, once that DNA was recovered from the handbag, it generated a match to Iestyn Davies's DNA profile. And the way that we convey that match was that it's a 1 in a billion. So what that means is it's 1 billion times more likely that the DNA originated from Iestyn Davies than it did an unrelated individual. And so the opinion was given that the DNA was transferred as a result of him having handled that handbag.
The case was starting to come together.
When I had identified Davies, we found out that he had a dog. So when he was arrested, there was a hair sample taken from his dog, which again went to the lab. We had recovered dog hairs from Fiona on her clothes, and we were able to do a DNA match, and that brought us back about a 2% accuracy that the dog hairs were attributed to his dog. And again, we had a match.
Iestyn Davies is charged with the murder of Fionn Wynne Roberts, but Detective Superintendent Challoner knows that there is one major flaw in his evidence.
The defence will make great play that the police haven't brought forward an eyewitness. Well, there isn't one. That's a fact of life. You can't manufacture an eyewitness. If no one was there, you don't have one. But of course, the defence will highlight the point that no one was there, no one's seen it.
The police inquiries relied more on technology and science than they did on looking for witnesses. There was a suspicion in Porthmadog that the killer was not Iestyn Davies. He was known to the community and not generally known to have a violent disposition, and so a lot of people believed that he was innocent.
And for people in Porthmadog, there was still a sense of fear. Had the police got the right man?
Nearly 12 months after the body of Fionn Wynne Roberts was found in a drainage ditch, the man accused of her murder, Iestyn Davies, is to stand trial.
In vast courtrooms, There was a tense atmosphere. This was a real human tragedy. A young woman with a whole life ahead of her that was cut so short. And throughout the trial, Iestyn Davies was pointing the finger at Fion's brother.
Iestyn Davies wasn't an immediate suspect, and he wasn't arrested for some time. We raised the suspicion that her brother was a suspect, had been a suspect, and our view, as we put it, was that he was still a suspect.
Despite their early arrests, the prosecution maintained that Fion's brother and father played no part in Fion's murder.
They were released after those interviews, and in the fullness of the inquiry, we eliminated them as responsible in any way. They were purely victims, and they had no responsibility for their sister and daughter's death.
The prosecution puts to Iestyn Davies evidence that links him to the tracksuit bottoms and trainer, items they believe belonged to the killer.
Prosecution case was based very much on being this important evidence of the tracksuit bottoms, and they'd been found in a sluice gate near to Fion's handbag and near to a muddy trainer. And the mud, the prosecution said, was from when her body had been put in the ditch. And there was also DNA evidence.
The discovery of Iestyn's DNA on the discarded clothing is compelling, but the defense are able to offer an explanation.
The tracksuit bottoms were accepted by Iestyn Davies to have been his. He gave an account of having washed them at work and hung them up on a fence, and they had disappeared. Now there's logic in that, because where they were found was quite close to where he said he'd hung them up to dry, and so that was credible.
However, it is revealed that Iestyn Davies' DNA was also found on Fion's clothes.
He gave as an explanation for that he had seen her on the Friday night at the station public house, and he'd given her a hug.
So if an individual gives an account in which they have been in legitimate contact with someone before the attack, we have to consider what is the chances or what is our expectation of DNA transferring in that setting. And obviously, if I hug someone, my DNA could transfer.
The prosecution are quick to offer their rebuttal.
Two witnesses were called to say that we've known Iestyn for many years, and we don't think he's a hugging sort of person, and that he didn't know Fion well enough that he would have spontaneously hugged her on seeing her.
The defense know that the eyewitness evidence from the historic assault in Porthmadog may be harder to explain away.
The difficulty that we had with the evidence of the previous incident is that the person said that the attacker had held a rock in his hand, and the body of Fion Roberts was found to have had a head injury consistent with having been hit with a blunt object, and that could have been a rock. So that would then become, in the prosecution's perspective, a weapon of choice.
Nonetheless, Iestyn's defense team raise a simple concern that casts a shadow of doubt over the eyewitness testimony.
The witness might have been mistaken in the identification of the person responsible.
The prosecution reveal their most damning evidence so far when they present to the jury CCTV of Iestyn Davies on the morning of Fion's murder. He appears to be wearing the tracksuit bottoms the police believe were worn by the killer.
It was a matter of capturing him on CCTV, capturing his movements to the scene where we believe that she was killed at the relevant time to where the attack happened on Fion. And at that time, he had with him his dog. We then capture him going back to the premises he was staying at. He changes clothes, and then he's captured going in the direction of the sluice gates. He then, after a short period of time, goes back to the premises where he's staying. What's most significant is in the first part of that journey, where we believe he attacked Fion, he is wearing the Adidas tracksuit bottoms with the stripes down the side, And when he goes back to his home and then he leaves, he is in a different set of clothing. So we believe he committed the crime, he went home, he changed and took all his clothing and his shoes, went down to the sluice gate and tried to discard them.
The CCTV evidence places Iestyn Davies in the vicinity of Fion's murder around the time she is believed to have died. But Davies claims this walk in the early hours is far from unusual.
He gave explanations for that, which were very early in the morning. He had a dog, Meg, who didn't let him sleep in, and the dog woke him early, and he went out walking the dog. The police asked him about the change of clothes, and he readily acknowledged that he had changed, but said that was often his habit. He'd go out for a very early morning walk in whatever was first to hand when he got up, but then he changed into what would be day clothes later on.
In the dock, Iestyn Davies seems unfazed by proceedings.
He was full of himself. In there, he was an expressionist cocky.
He was cool, he was calm. This was a man who wasn't buckling under the pressure of intense questioning. Iestyn Davies was almost laughing at the law. There was a telling moment when he said, "I'm enjoying this." This was during his cross-examination, which was quite shocking to those in the courtroom at the time. And don't forget, we were talking about the most horrendous murder of a young woman. They painted a chilling or sinister outline of the true character of the man. A man who seemed unfazed by what he was being accused of. He was so devious. He was a man who hadn't panicked, who smirked while being questioned about a murder of a young woman.
But the prosecution have evidence that they believe will wipe the smile from Iestyn Davies' face.
There was DNA found in the knot of Fion's scarf, which was used to strangle her and gag her.
And because the DNA was inside the knot, it suggests that it belongs to the person who tied the ligature.
You have to remember that this person was found in a water body, so that there's a risk that it's going to remove some evidence. But the fact that we've got this knotted part of the scarf means that it would have been protected. It's a forensic goldmine. So DNA is this kind of silent witness.
And the DNA is a match to Iestyn Davies.
All this evidence was pointing towards Iestyn Davies. The story of her brother being the real killer, it all seemed to be becoming something of a red herring. He wasn't the clever killer that he perhaps thought he was. He was concocting lies, and his story was starting to fall apart under scrutiny.
After 6 weeks of evidence, the jury retired to consider their verdict.
We had no expectation of a result going one way or the other. There might have been a conviction, there might have been an acquittal. I stopped looking in the crystal ball many years ago. We have no idea which way a jury's going to go, and every time is a mystery.
Tensions in court are running high when, after several days of deliberation, the jury are unable to agree on a verdict.
The judge brought them back in, and they said they couldn't unanimously come to a verdict, and he gave them the option of a majority verdict.
The jury had been out for some days, and I think for many of us, we were reaching the stage, is this going to be a retrial?
Now, once they'd been given that opportunity to bring back a majority verdict, it wasn't so long after that that they actually returned.
By a majority verdict of 10-2, Iestyn Davies is found guilty of the murder of Fion Wynne Roberts.
And the sentence was the only one to be expected. That was life imprisonment, with a recommendation of 25 years. That means that the defendant cannot even be considered for parole until he's been in custody for 25 years.
He thought all that evidence was going to be washed away in the Irish Sea, never to be found by the police. But thankfully, justice prevailed.
Iestyn Davies was remarkably stoical about it. There were no tantrums, no outbursts. He knew that he was possibly going to be convicted, and that possibility turned into a reality.
My theory is that Fionn had come face to face with Davis. He started making advances, and when she rejected those advances, he committed the act that he did.
The sentence comes as a huge relief to Fionn's family and the community of Porthmadog.
They were a well-known family and a respected family. They were liked and it's admired because they were all hard-working people, and the community felt very strongly that they'd suffered a great loss.
In a final cruel twist, it transpires that Iestyn Davies had visited the family home just days after he had killed Fionn.
And it really did add to the agony of the Roberts family. They'd lost their daughter in these most terrible circumstances. And then have the killer turn up at their home, comforting them. This was a truly grotesque thing for anyone to do.
For Fionn's family, friends and neighbours in Porthmadog, the loss of one of their own continues to cut deep.
It caused huge upset. It was going to take time for the people to get over what had happened to this well-liked girl.
Jeffrey Dahmer. Oh, boy. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite movie? Silence of the Lambs? Is it? Is it really? Are you serious? Silence of the Lambs? What did they do in that movie? Jesus. Do you know what the Buffalo Bill would have done in Silence of the Lambs? Can you recount that? I'll keep this in. Okay. If Buffalo Bill, man, he stuck on his in water, but he took kind of the skin off of some of the mineral. You remember that? You told some people now. Bill does the cares that you used to like that movie. And that was your favorite movie. Of course, you're not quite good enough to be a Hannibal Lecter. But I think Buffalo Bill, whatever his name was there, probably it. Do you realize they're maybe making a movie in this on that? Yeah, they might. In fact, the FBI has it. I'm certain. You could be famous on those occasions. It's like you could be a famous man. Did you realize it? You could be famous.
This guy is a serial murderer. I think he's insane. He thought it was Jesus for real. I said, why did you do this to these people? I saw my father do it. He is just evil incarnate. We have to put him in the ground. We're gonna kill him. We're gonna kill him.
Throughout the investigation, the interviews that were occurring with Haddon, he had been disclosing different people that he killed, different locations, and there were a few in particular that he felt that he could take the detectives and the FBI to.
We took Haddon and Jack on the road, and we're driving towards Wellfleet, Massachusetts, particularly into an area called Pammit Point, where Haddon spent a lot of time of his youth. We figured all these places would trigger Haddon to talk more and cooperate more.
We brought Jack Truitt with Clark, because Clark wouldn't come without him. I mean, there was a bond there between those two.
The security going into this had to be paramount. Because if you recall, both of these men are convicted felons. They're both murderers, they're both convicted. Both of these guys were straight up killers. So we were very, very concerned with the safety and possible revenge against Haddon Clark, since the media had been tracking him. He was not the most favored person in America at that time.
Well, I was kind of happy in the beginning, because I'm like, I'm getting out of prison for a while.
We had a rule. Nobody was allowed to wear a gun in the car with Truitt or Clark, just in case.
They put Haddon and Jesus in the car with me. Jesus in the front seat, Haddon in back with me. I was a little concerned that they were leaving me by myself in a vehicle with two murderers. I was the female in the group. I was young. I was new to law enforcement. And I knew Haddon viewed me as a weak link. I was definitely going to be a target if anyone was. We were in the car the first day, I think, at least 12 hours. You know, it's not easy talking to someone for that long, period, much less someone with a personality like his. But I certainly was trying to keep the conversations going. I would talk about old TV shows that he may know or things we had in common.
Why do you like the Waltons? That was like the perfect family.
It's based on the 40s and stuff. Well, a lot of things on that show remind me of my childhood.
It reminds me of your childhood, but you told me that your family was not good in your childhood. So why the Waltons are like, it was a great family. I don't understand.
Well, I don't know, remind me of certain things.
Right.
It's just a show. I just like that show. A lot of people like watching horror shows. I'm not into that. I don't like horror shows.
He wanted a girlfriend, as in a friend, that could talk clothes and different things with him. We would talk about stores and clothing and different brands, and we became friends.
So, lo and behold, Haddon starts talking about this woman, a lady in the dunes in Provincetown.
It's an enduring mystery that has frustrated and challenged investigators in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Who is the so-called Lady of the Dunes, and who killed her?
You know, if you look at the state of Massachusetts, it's almost like flexing your muscle, and Provincetown is right here. My name is Rick Nagel. I was a cold case investigator for the Massachusetts State Police, and I was involved with the investigation of the Lady in the Dunes.
In the summer of 1974, a young girl walking her dog down a Cape Cod beach stumbled upon the body of a woman. Brutally murdered, the victim was nearly beheaded, found naked on a beach towel, both hands chopped off and never found.
One of her forearms was severed. The other hand was severed. The skull was crushed, and there was some teeth missing.
This is a prepaid call from Haddon Clark. I was fishing that night on this boat. I was coming over the gills with my fish when I saw something.
And what did you discover?
A body. I didn't pay much mind to it.
Why not? There's a person who's dead, and you didn't take mind to it?
No.
Her body was discovered right across the street from where he used to work, at the Moore's restaurant.
Worked at the Moore's restaurant. Sorry. How are things in your life now?
Bad. Haddon was a big fisherman, big-time ocean fisherman. And he says he had a surf casting rod with him. And Haddon talks about striking up a conversation with this woman.
He's in her late 20s, early 30s.
And then eventually taking the surf casting rod and smashing her head in with it. From the autopsy report, the mutilation was post-mortem. But the crushing of the skull was the cause of death. This is the general area where the body was found, in the sandy area just off the road here. Now, it's a beautiful place, but you think of the killing, it's a scary place. Now, we've been here for over 30 minutes, and no one has come by. You can scream and scream and scream, and no one will hear you. No! Help! Hey! Over here! Help! No! Help me! Someone's trying to kill me! Help! What do we hear? Nothing. Good place to kill someone, I guess.
Haddon told all the people that was involved in this case that he killed the Lady in the Dunes.
And so we took him out to the Cape in this dune area to show us where he killed her and kind of give information that wasn't public to verify that he did in fact do this.
When the body was discovered, they were not able to identify her. It was extremely difficult. You go back to 1974, we did not have DNA. You didn't have much to work on. Because the hands were missing, we did not have fingerprints.
What did you do to her?
I saw an envelope that he had drawn of a hand
the fingers of which had been removed, put on fish hooks, and were used as bait.
Or in general, used as fishing bait.
That's his humor.
He was definitely teasing us or, tantalizing us with different clues. There was pictures of hands and insinuating that he was going to give us a clue to where exactly they were located.
Based on what Haddon was saying, again, in my mind, 100% Haddon Clark killed that woman. When we first got up to Wellfleet, we met with the Wellfleet Police Department.
You have no idea what it feels like to be next to Haddon Clark. He was not a person you wanted to be near. Terribly disturbed human being. When I stood next to him, I said to myself, the most moral thing to do at this moment in time would be to put my gun to his temple and pull the trigger. He has no business being on this planet.
During one of the road trips and part of the transportation, we lodged Jack and Haddon in the Connecticut State Department of Corrections. Because they're both convicted murderers, their classification has to be consistent with the housing that we put them in. So you can't put them in a camp prison or a minimum security prison. They have to go into the Supermax version. They would get housed in the areas or the units that held the worst of the worst.
I think I know what I mean with bodies. Liking bodies.
After interviewing Haddon Clark, we concluded that there were numerous possible locations where Haddon could actually show us where bodies were. And there was a lot of talk about burying bodies in the same cemetery in Connecticut where his grandfather was buried. And then, of course, the final place that we were going to go was going to be the grandparents' property, which seemed to be where he was most comfortable and where he, in all likelihood, buried most of his bodies.
What was the thing you said you didn't ever ask me about the other girls?
I think he had all that information written in a diary in a root jar on Cape Cod somewhere. People tried to find that stuff, but it's below the surface now.
How many years of stuff was written down in that diary?
I would say at least 5 years.
So there's 5 years. There's a lot of stuff to put in a diary. And no one's ever found that diary?
I mean, I told him to get back with it. He just couldn't find it. It's trying to go there in a root jar.
I think it was like he was looking down on mice trying to find the cheese in a maze. I think he enjoyed looking down upon all the detectives running around at his very whim, whatever he said, and I think he enjoyed this cat and mouse game.
Haddon kept saying he was Kristen. Kristen was the one killing these people, so he had to be Kristen if he was going to take us back to those burial sites.
He wanted female clothing to wear at his grandfather's place.
So we were going to have to buy a wig, bra, shoes, skirts, and a slip, and I was told the budget was only $100. Kristen had expensive taste. Coach, LL Bean, designer clothing. That's why I was like, Kristen, I'm not going to be able to get you those things, but I'm going to do my best to find some of that stuff knockoff. We literally drove over to a Ross that was open, and we shut it down. Then the other agents and detectives went in with weapons, and we brought in Kristen and Jesus. They're both in shackles and handcuffs, and those poor employees of Ross must have been scared to death. It's going through my mind. Like, this is bizarre. I am never going to forget this for the rest of my life.
When we brought him out, dressed as a woman, he's got that, again, eaten grin on his face, and his eyes are all wide. He's got the brown wig on. He's got the earth tone clothes on. It's not Gloria Vanderbilt, but, he was satisfied. Part of it was some of his control over us. Then again, it's us giving him what he wanted so we can get something.
We were leaving the Barnstable County Jail to take Clark over to his grandfather's property. During the whole trip, Haddon had this cardboard plaque that he had made.
What's that a picture of? The prayer card? It's lost its use.
It was about this big of Jesus on one side, and there was a prayer on the other side.
And as a religious article, we're not allowed to take that away from him.
So I was in the back seat of the car, and Desiree was also on the other side of Clark.
And then I noticed that he is making himself bleed. He is scratching his thumb with his other thumb, which I knew he had said he likes to bleed like a female, and that's part of his thing when he kills people and kind of recreates. So of course I'm thinking, he's causing himself to bleed and suck blood because we're about to go to one of these burial sites and this is going to be the real deal. And I can tell you, you have this sixth sense. You know when something's wrong, and I knew something was wrong in that car.
Clark started going berserk. He was just moaning and screaming.
The hairs on the back of my neck went on. That kind of psycho banshee scream, and it doesn't stop. Now I'm trying to grab his hands and stop him. So then, of course, he tries to headbutt me and bite me. So Ed grabs his head. I'll never forget these beady eyes, the bald head. He's laying like this with his yellow teeth just screaming.
When I opened the door of the vehicle, that Haddon was actually making an aggressive move as if he was going to bite the other agent that was present in the backseat with him in the neck. At that point, I grabbed him by the shirt, and in one motion, I punched him in the face as hard as I could. Because the last thing you want to do is start shooting at or anything like that. So the de-escalation was a little bit of escalation, if you will. Felt good, too, I'm going to say.
So we then drove and took a detour to a police station.
And then Jack Truitt said, I got something I have to tell you.
I told Lou that I think he has a weapon in that necklace.
He's got a razor blade concealed in there he's gonna cut you with. They took that plaque away from him. And we opened it up, and sure enough, there was a razor blade concealed in it. When he was doing his gyrations in the back seat, maybe that's when he was planning on cutting me.
Were you scared of your safety?
No, if he would have pulled a razor blade out, I would have taken it away from him. That'd be nice.
Haddon Clark claims to have buried some of his victims here at what used to be his grandfather's home. But police don't know how much truth they're getting from the confessed serial killer, a strange man who today wore an auburn wig and insisted another inmate, a friend of his, make the trip with them.
Prior to us launching, I always had a spiel. I would say very, very quietly into their ear, I said, if I think there is anything out of the ordinary going on, if I suspect for 1 second that you are going to try and stage an escape, I said, the first bullet I got for you is going into the same ear that I'm talking in right now. Comprende? And Jack looked at me, I remember, and he was stroking his beard, and he said, I got you, bro. You ain't going to have any problems.
It was beautiful. It was an old house, a lot of flowers, kind of sits up on the hill off the road.
And what made that space so amazing was that when you went up into the woods across from the valley, that was all national seashore, so we could go for miles in any direction. And as a kid, I mean, what better thing to have is a whole forest to just wander through.
We were just seeing if he could point out any place where he may have buried a body.
When we were walking through there, he was more so meandering through the woods. He wanted to see it again. He wanted to be there.
I guess it was special to him because of boyhood playground. I could see why he was attracted to it.
My grandparents, I go back when it was fire. I like to be by myself.
We were all running around the woods, and he said, if you just give me a little time to get my bearings, I'm pretty sure I can find her body.
After a couple hours of this, it became very obvious to us that he was reliving his fantasies, and he was quite honestly enjoying where he had been. And at that point, I had a conversation with him in the woods, and I told him that he needed to get back on his game, and that he needed to refocus. And he looked at me and he said, I'll eat your children.
He was having his moment of running around in the woods. And I was like, what the on top of everything else, it was like, okay, I'm gonna kill him.
And Jack said, I've got an idea. And I remember him looking down towards my hip. And he said,
"Let me shoot his ass and put an end to this. All you gotta do is say that Haddon went for your gun. I got it away from him and put 3 in it. End of story." He said, "Listen, I understand what you're saying and how you're feeling, but nobody on this team will go for that."
I would never have done it, though. That's crossing the line. And now I'm as bad as Haddon.
At some point when we got back up to closer to the grandpa's house, this is when Haddon became very agitated.
When we were on the grandparents' property, he was able to take us to a spot there where there was actually a structure that was a screened-in sort of porch that was detached from the house, which was called a wickie-up. I had never heard the term before. It's a Native American term for a shelter.
He would tell me when he was a kid, he would sometimes sleep in this. I could see that.
It was a little shack they would play in, and that's where he said that he had buried the little girl after he dug her up at the cemetery.
So when we selected to dig on the property, we specifically dug behind there.
Very painstaking, detailed, slow work. And every shovelful that comes out of the ground gets rough sifted, and then fine sifted. And you're looking for everything from clothing, jewelry, bones, teeth.
It was a significant area that we dug, and we dug pretty deep. It took a while, but they never did find anything.
He couldn't pinpoint an exact area. If there was, in fact, something there, we don't know. He didn't pinpoint where Michelle was either. Even when we were in the woods, 15 feet from where we buried Michelle, he didn't recognize it.
When we couldn't find anything, we became pretty frustrated with Haddon. And I remember Jack specifically saying, "I need a minute with him."
I know Jesus was frustrated because he's saying he can deliver, and now we get to the place that is the sure thing, and we have found nothing.
He had got me to where my brain was not thinking, except this guy don't belong on the planet at all. But I picked him up by the throat, off his feet. He was blue. When I finally heard Lou saying, "Come on, man, let him down," I recognized what was going on. And I dropped him.
When we couldn't find anything and we put it to him, "Hey, where is what you're telling us?" He kind of clammed up. I remember him saying, "Well, maybe we're in the wrong spot." Down the road during all the interviews that we were doing out in Western Correctional Institute out in Cumberland, Haddon Clark gave us very specific information about Sarah Pryor that only he would have known. We got up with the Massachusetts State Police, and when we briefed the Mass State Police that we were working with on Cape Cod, they informed us that they had already arrested a suspect. They considered it a closed case.
About a month after Sarah went missing, there was an incident of attempted abduction not far from Wayland, but she managed to fight him off. That suspect's name was John Wordy.
The Massachusetts State Police were always of the opinion that John Wordy is the one that abducted and killed Sarah Pryor. I was never allowed to look at their case file, for whatever reason.
Come on. What do you mean, come on, man? Come on, man. You're trying to tell me you did something you didn't do is what you're doing. Yeah. That's fine, I didn't do it. You're very predictable. I didn't do it, okay. Why are you here? It's easier to right now say I didn't do it. Why? Because it's easier that way. I didn't do it. Who's it easy on? Both you and me. Oh, well. Come on.
there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Haddon Clark murdered Sarah Pryor. Absolutely no doubt.
I think he was responsible for Sarah Pryor only because of what he told me. All I know are the facts. Am I sure? No. It's one of those things you can only dig so far. I mean, if you end your search here, how do you know it's not back there? Another foot. We don't know. Can't dig the whole cape up. Stuff costs a lot of money. But it just ended.
I do consider Haddon Clark to be a serial killer. It's never been confirmed that Haddon killed any other people other than Michelle Dorr and Laura Hodeley. However, I believe, given the way that he killed Michelle and the cleanup after, that he had to have killed someone before that.
Well, there's a possibility with what he was saying, but nothing he said would ever materialize.
I never think people know what I was thinking. It's like a game of chess. Alright. Morning. Now Tony started to set a trap. They might be thinking, oh, they're taking a piece, and they're going to take a good piece of chess. They're leaving it out there for them to take it, but it's a mistake.
I'm sure he had the greatest time dancing all those officials around wherever it was, what town he had got them to take him to look for bodies. I'm sure he had a blast doing that. Because if I put uncertainty in your mind, I can be screwing with you, and hadn't truly enjoyed that. Just for the jollies of being a dick.
When we took him back to the prison, he said, Ed, I'm sorry for the problems I caused you, or something like that. But he nothing remorseful.
You got a few things to tell you.
At the time, he might have perceived me as the only friend he had. As much as I disliked him.
Say that, buddy. Yeah.
It's hard to be nice to a person like that, but I was. Not in the beginning, but in the end.
When we got back, I got moved into another cell away from Haddon. And it just felt like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. I'm so glad to get away from you and hope I never see you again in my life. I always miss being out in society. I used to stand at my window and I'd think of stuff like, man, will I ever get out to the real world? And will I ever have that opportunity again? And of course, I would always say, nah, you ain't getting out. Every 3 to 5 years, I had a parole hearing, and it didn't last long. We will get back to you unless you know your decision. And it was always no.
Jack's prospects for getting out were not looking good. He was a lifer. The governor in place at the time, the policy was that no lifer will be paroled. It was then that I had conversations with Davis Ruark.
Joe Gamble is a very interesting person. He's the best homicide detective with whom I have ever worked in my career. Joe was very impressed with Jack. Joe was impressed with Jack's openness.
Jack Truitt was the linchpin in the recovery of Michelle Dorr's body. He had courage, given his situation in prison, to bring that to the police. I believe that what he was convicted of years before, that he had matured, and that he would not be a harm to the general public.
Joe was hoping that we could come up with some means by which Jack could have some time shaved off of his sentence. This put me in a difficult position. I have Jack Truitt. He's been convicted of murdering someone. On the other hand, I have the homicide detective I respect the most who's saying this guy deserves to have some special consideration. So there was still a little bit of a conflict there.
Davis Ruark, when he floated the idea of possibly seeking a judge that might reconsider Jack's life sentence and give him a certain number of years, which would allow him to be eligible for parole. It ultimately led to a hearing in front of the judge.
When I went in front of the judge, I was nervous. Oh, because you don't know what can happen. Everybody that was there to speak on my behalf got up and did it.
They wanted me to just, talk at the hearing and say what I had to say, but I had too much to say and I didn't know what to say. So all I could do was cry. This is what I did at the hearing. I couldn't talk.
When the judge came back, he said, I've made my decision. Your life sentence is gone. He said, I'm giving you 50 years. You only do half your time in the state of Maryland. So, if you got a 50-year sentence, you do 25. I had 36 in at that time. So I knew I was going home. I mean, we always say it was the best day of my life. Felt wonderful, man. It felt like God had blessed me with this and I'm not going to mess it up. Simple as that. The day I got out of prison, they were releasing me and I saw Jackie on the other side of the fence. They didn't open the gate yet, but she was right there. I said, you ready for this? She said, are you ready for this? I said, oh, hell yeah.
And he walked through the gates. It was like meeting a new person almost.
We went home. House was huge to me. I'm used to putting my hands like this and touching this wall and this wall.
When Jack got out, he was like a kid in the candy store. He's just so interested in how everything has changed, but then he is so mad about everything has changed. He's angry because he's not the man that he was when he went to prison. That person's still inside, but the old person just can't do what he used to do.
Jack served his time, and he paid a huge price for what he was convicted of. But ultimately, he, at great personal sacrifice and great personal risk, he did the right thing, and he brought Michelle Dorr home.
I feel good about what we did. I was able to bring peace to this family. I've never hated anyone. I hate him so much.
Anything else you want to say on it, or?
No, I'm done with him.
It's good to see her again, like this, smiling and living life. But wasn't for Haddon Clark, she'd be here.
It's breathtaking to think about this one man's illness, sickness, and vile, horrible mind. How, his actions have just created ripples through so many people's lives and sent us in directions that we shouldn't have gone in. I never gave a lot of thought to, why did he do it? Where did he come from? Because I thought it's not fair to Laura. She deserves all the space in my brain. Sometimes I think about who she would have married, where she'd be living, and whether she would have had children my kid's age. I think about her all the time.
I thought about him getting out. Occasionally, I run his name through the prison system just to see where he's at.
We knew that if he got out of jail, he would kill again. Nobody would be safe.
He's paranoid schizophrenic. Adam's clearly dangerous. He's very cunning. He's very manipulative. He knows how to act normal and fake things in front of people. I mean, he killed a 6-year-old girl spur of the moment, supposedly, just because the opportunity was there and he was angry. So it's very concerning if he were to get out. You can't force him to take his medication. You can't really monitor that.
If Haddon were to get out of jail, I think he would go back to murdering people. I don't think he can help himself. Anybody that crosses his path, his instinct is to lash out.
My hope is that any sane parole board does the right thing for the community and that Haddon never has release, even at a very old age. If it becomes a real issue, I'll be the first to write a letter to the parole board arguing against it, because this guy, he's a broken toy,
He definitely would kill again. There's no in my mind.
Well, he's already told me personally that if he was to get out, everybody that's done me wrong, that will be the first, and then I'll go back to doing what I was doing.
As soon as he gets out, we're going to track him down, and we have to put him in the ground. We're going to kill him.
I want to know what you're doing. What do you plan on doing with the stuff we talked about?
I don't know. I don't know yet. What would you change in your life if you could do it all over again?
Well, some things I would change, but the bad things I did, the murders I did, I did it wrong. I know that. You didn't ask me about Warren Benson or Harry Potter. It's manufacturing good wine.
What does that mean?
Michelle Gore, Silver Spring, Maryland. Laura Holman, Jackson, Maryland. Maureen Benson, Wallaston, Connecticut. Mary Bond, New Haven, Connecticut. Sarah Fryer, Wayland, Massachusetts. Mighty Second, Winder, Brooklyn, New York.
How do you know their names so well and where they're from?
I get to those areas. I've been all over the United States. I remember certain incidents that I was in the area.
Haddon, who are all these women you just brought up, these names? Who are they? How do you know them?
Wait a second, someone's at my door. Hey, I gotta go.
Đây mình xin giới thiệu các bạn một bài hát cũng của nghệ sĩ Trần Việt, bài hát Mẹ Tôi. Mẹ ơi, con đã già rồi, con ngồi nhớ mẹ khóc như trẻ con. Mẹ ơi, con đã già rồi, con ngồi ngỡ ngàng nhớ thương cha chi lớn không thành. Sóng thêm cao một ngày nhớ mẹ sóng trào khơi xa, trời gió mây ngàn một ngày khóc mẹ chẳng tàn sao rơi. Mẹ ơi thế giới mênh mông không bằng nhà mình. Tuổi thơ như chiếc gối êm cho tôi ra úp mặt. Dù cho phú quý vinh quang không bằng có mẹ. Trèo lên dãy núi thiên thai ôi à, mẹ tôi trong áng mây vàng. Mẹ ơi hãy dắt con theo ôi à, để con mãi mãi bên mẹ. Mẹ ơi thế giới mênh mông không bằng nhà mình. Dù cho phú quý vinh quang không bằng có mẹ. Biển sóng thét cao một ngày nhớ mẹ sóng trào khơi xa, trời gió mây ngàn một mây khóc mẹ chẳng tàn sao rơi. Trèo lên dãy núi thiên thai ôi à, mẹ tôi về đâu ngàn vạn mây trắng bay theo ôi à, mẹ ơi mẹ về đâu. Mẹ ơi con đã già rồi, con ngồi nhớ mẹ khóc như trẻ con. Mẹ ơi con đã già rồi, con ngồi ngỡ ngàng nhớ ngôi nhà xưa. Ngày xưa cha ngồi uống rượu, mẹ ngồi đàn nào ngoài hiên mùa đông cây vàng lá rụng. Ngày xưa chỉ hát vu vơ những câu ca cổ cho em nằm mơ. Ngày xưa mẹ đắp cho con đậm thân khoang cổ ấm ơi mẹ yêu. Ngày xưa bên giường cha nằm mẹ ngồi xa lắm nhìn cha, thương cha thì lớn không thành. Biển sóng thêm cao một ngày nhớ mẹ sóng trào khơi xa, trời gió mây ngàn một ngày khóc mẹ chẳng tàn sao rơi. Mẹ ơi thế giới mênh mông không bằng nhà mình. Tuổi thơ như chiếc gối êm cho tôi ra úp mặt. Dù cho phú quý vinh quang không bằng có mẹ. Trèo lên dãy núi thiên thai ôi à,